Hello, welcome to In a Pickle Knitting. My name is Donna. Today is Monday, June 25th, 2018. I'm coming to you from Manassas, Virginia in the U.S., and this is a podcast about knitting. If you are joining for the first time, I hope you find something that you will enjoy listening to. And if you're returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back again. Today's episode is in which she wants to be left alone, which if you visited before, you'll know that has a reference to our children's literature book that I'll be sharing today. I do have finished objects, some works in progress, a giveaway announcement, and a new wonderful surprise giveaway. It was a surprise to me. And so I wanted to podcast today to get that information out to you as soon as I could. And I guess just some, miscellaneous things at the end. So let's get started with my finished objects. The first thing that I finished was a pair of socks that I was knitting from some Felice yarn. It was my first time knitting with Felice yarn, and I enjoyed it a lot. I'm curious to see how well it wears. It's a very soft yarn. It feels just lovely as you're knitting with it, and the socks feel great, and I hope that they wear well. They do have 25% nylon, so they probably will. This is Felice from Knit Picks, and here's my pair of socks that are finished. This colorway was called the Goth Kitty colorway, and the number on that, although I don't think these are repeated, but I think that number itself might be 27497, and the lot number last time I said was the number, but I think that might be the colorway number that says it's the lot number, but it is Knit Picks Felice in the Goth Kitty colorway. So on these socks, let me see if I can remember, the 2x2 rib, of course I just did a plain vanilla, but on self-striping socks I usually do an afterthought heel. This time I wanted to just do a heel flap and gusset. I did it as a stockinette all the way, and I did, I don't remember what heel I did. It was not the Dutch heel. I think it might be, I don't remember, but anyway, I turned the heel, and I did do a rounded toe. And I did wait to do my gusset decreases instead of starting right here. I knit plain till I finished this gray stripe, and then I did my gusset decreases. Now, when I do that, I don't do decrease, knit around, decrease, knit around. I just decrease every row until I'm back to the number of stitches that I want to have. So this is a finished object. I did do the heels in a Mothy and the Squid little mini that I had that came with a rainbow mini set from her because I didn't want to disrupt my stripes. I have this much left over. This is both skeins put together. I just put a knot in them. It's not a knot that would keep the striping sequence or anything. It's just they are those little skeins that come where you can just pull straight from them, and they're just a mess at the end. You need two 50-gram skeins. That Felice comes in 50 grams to do the sock. So I had this left over, and right now I don't remember how much is left over. I usually use about 70 grams, but having used a different yarn for the heels, I might have a little bit more than 30 left, but that's my leftover. So that's my first finished object. I think I just have two. And the second one would be the colorwork mitts that I was working on. I showed you last time, and these are the Underwing mitts by Erica Hauser Designs. And thank you so much to one of our viewers who gave me a suggestion on my color work. As I've mentioned so often before, I do struggle with color work with attention. And I had started the first one last time. I might have even finished. No, I don't think I finished the first one the last time, but I took up her suggestion, which was try the 9-inch circular. And I never would have tried that because I had been so unhappy with using that with knitting socks because my gauge was a lot looser than any other method that you can knit socks. And I thought, well, but that might help with the tension here because you don't want it too tight, and then maybe I can keep the smaller needle. I just wasn't sure. Well, I still don't have perfect color work, perfect tension, anything perfect. I'm much happier with how it looks all together, and especially because it's a 9-inch circular, you don't have that issue on the sides that's where I would get a real tension problem, because no matter how you were doing it, there was a place there that you have to turn and you just can't keep going. And with the 9-inch circular, you do just keep going. So I felt like right here was so much better than before. So here is, it is a pair, but I'm showing you the nicer one because this is the one that I did entirely with the 9-inch circular. And I'm happy with it. It's not perfect, as I said, but I'm very pleased with it. So that's my next finished object. And for that, I had used some scrap yarn. The black was left over from Done Roving mini set that had black and gray and red, and I had used it for my surprise party shawl by Helen Stewart, and I'd used most of the minis, but I had two of the darkest black. I didn't need those because I was doing the main color of that shawl in black, so I didn't need those at all. So I used those for these, and I was very happy with that. For the white color, that was just bare yarn that I had left over from dyeing, and I was just dyeing a mini one day, and I didn't dye the rest of it up, so I have that left over, and I probably have enough to make another pair if I wanted, or close to it. So I wouldn't want to go close, but those are my two finished objects. So let's move on to some works in progress. My first work in progress is the tank top that I'm working on. The pattern comes from the Knit Pearl magazine. This was spring, summer 2015, and I am making this tank called the Meandering Top. Meandering Top, yes. And the pattern is by Queena Lee. And the yarn that I'm using is a Savannah from the Fiber Company. And this is a DK yarn, and the composition is 50% wool, 20% cotton, 15% linen, and 15% soy. And the color is the Bluegrass colorway, although I do understand this is a discontinued yarn. So where I am in this work in progress, and you know, it's so hard with these things that are so long in the round. I have finished all of the meandering part, so that involved, well, first a short little, I think called a split rib, or anyway, it's not just straight ribbing, but done very much like that, and I'm losing my word there today. But then you did some short rows after a few rows of plain stockinette, and then you did these waves, and then you had to, this side is shorter, so then you did short rows up to here to make it even. At this point, I am ready to just knit in the round plain stockinette for, I think, 5.5 more inches I have to go till I'm at the point that they said to be at. And it's going along nicely. I'm enjoying the yarn. It's kind of a fun pattern because you're doing something here, then a little bit of stockinette, and then you're doing this, and then, well, short rows, and then doing this, and then more short rows. And now it's kind of nice to be at a point where I can just pick it up at any time and just knit, not have to think about where am I in the pattern. So that means this is something I can work on in the mornings instead of, say, a pair of socks where, you know, there's just at this point no thinking until I get to another about 5.5 inches done. So that's coming along nicely. I'm really enjoying it. And I've got that in my bag by Awesome Granny that I shared the last time, my library bag, and it's got plenty of room for this top. My next work in progress is one that I also shared with you last time, and this is being kept in a bag that I made, one of my 3-zipper bags, but it's a little bit larger for shawl. Now the shawl that I'm making is not very far along, so doesn't take very much to keep it right now. The yarn that I'm using is Shalimar Yarns. This is a DK weight also. It's in the crayfish colorway, And it is 75% superwash merino and 15% cashmere, then 10% silk. It's delightful to knit with. It's very soft. So where I am now, and this is called the Sophie, just plain Sophie. It's called Sophie by Paulina P. And I'll show you a picture on the cover here. I think this could be the shawl or the shawlette or scarf. One pattern is done in one skein, and if you want to make it larger, you use 2 skeins, and I'm using 2 skeins for this. So I'll show you where I am. I need about 7 more repeats, I think, and I'll be about halfway. Right now we're increasing and then it'll be decreasing, so that's how I know where I am. The edge, as you'll see, has a little detail here that's done with some twisted stitches, and then you've got this braided cable there, and you've got some eyelet along the edges. And so as you started down here, as you knit, you're always knitting this edging. It's this side of the shawl that gets larger than just a plain stockinette side. So it's nice when you're done, you're just gonna be done. It's gonna, you're gonna be back down to a piece about this big to bind off. So that'll be nice to have this beautiful edging. I'm really enjoying it. I like the color, and I think that's pretty accurate. On the screen that I see, looks pretty accurate to what I'm seeing. It's gray tonal with this mauve or rose color in with it. So I think that's going to be useful, and I'm really enjoying it. Just doing a couple of repeats every day or so, and it'll get done. I certainly don't need it at this time of the year when it's 90 degrees every day. So that is my shawl that I was working on last time, just as I was working on the tank last time. But I do have some things that I'm working on that I had not shared last time when I finished the socks and finished the mitts. Then I wanted to add something else. If you're following along every episode, you might know that we're doing a make-along called Oldies. And the reason for calling it Oldies is we're using old patterns, things that we bought a long time ago, or put into our Ravelry library, bought in a magazine, or just a pattern that we've wanted to do for a long time and we haven't done it. Or some yarn or fabric that you bought a while ago and you had a plan for it. Well, that was the case with my meandering top. That was 3 years ago that I bought that, I believe, this yarn. And the Sophie shawl, I've had that pattern. I had not purchased it, but it had been on my wish list, but I bought the yarn for it at least a year ago, maybe more than that. And this next object I want to show you is the same. I had technically started this. It's a large cowl. I had technically started it, I think, 3 years ago. And I made a mistake. And I could not fix it on my own because it has cables, and the mistake was in the cables. And I couldn't bear to actually pull it back. I'm like that. If I make a big mistake that requires pulling back a lot, I have to just zip the bag up and put it away out of my sight for a while, and then I can bring my heart around later to working on it. But it was also a yarn that was difficult to work on because it is extra chunky, extra bulky. And let me show you the needles that I'm using. But I wasn't using these needles. I had bought specifically for this project, and it is a size 19-15 millimeter needles. And you could do it on straight needles, but I bought a Addy circular, and the needles were a problem. And I happened to have these, very strangely. I did not buy them. My daughter went to change in her condo, went to change the air filter for the your heating and air conditioning system, and this pair of needles was stuck in there, wedged in there with the filter, those removable filters. I guess it must have been rattling for the previous tenant, and they put this in. That's all we could imagine, is they put this in to keep it from moving back and forth or something. Maybe they didn't have the right size one in there, but my daughter said, Mom, do you want these? She's not a knitter. She's not a crafter too much. So I said, well, sure, you know, I don't really do things on big needles. Well, it hit me as I was using those metal needles and just struggling with the yarn being on there too tight. And I thought, hey, I wonder if they're the same size, and they were. So I'm doing it, and it works better on this for me, bamboo needles. So let me show you what it is. First of all, it's called the fold over cowl. Sorry, I should take it out of that plastic because it'll be easier to see. Fold over cowl, and you can see that it's got this cable detail along the bottom and very bulky yarn. And this is from Universal Pattern Collection, and I got it on Ravelry. I don't remember if I paid for it or not. It might have been a free pattern. I saw this made up in a yarn shop. I saw it in Nature's Yarn in Fairfax, Virginia, which is no longer in business, sadly. And they had it made up, and I saw it and got the pattern information and bought the yarn. It said you needed 2 skeins of this, which is Wisdom Yarns Poems Fort. And I know a lot of you will say Forte. That's what you hear most often, but the dictionary gives the preferred pronunciation as Fort. It is 100% wool, 150 grams with 90 yards. So 180 yards altogether. I absolutely just, this is where my yarn ran out of the first skein. And so I should be 50% done, but unless I block this, I'm not at the length it's supposed to be. So I'm either going to run out of yarn, well, I'm just going to have to stop. And maybe I could find something to just finish off the edge with if it's not right. But here's what I have. Let me just kind of spread it out here. That's the wrong side. And this is the right side with this cable. So there are 3 different cable stitches in this, and they're not difficult, except for me, I had a little, when I get to this stitch right here, everything stops. No noise, nobody can make a sound or be, I don't even want another human being in the room with me when I'm doing this. It's not difficult, but I have to, one at a time, do this, okay, did that, do this. And all you're doing is crossing that over so it looks like, you know, it crosses. And that's a mistake that I had made down here. So I got to this point, made a mistake, didn't know what to do, and let it sit for 2 years or more, longer than 2 years. So I ripped back to here. So I still call that I just started, because I ripped back to where all that was, picked it up, and started again. So I have some nice buttons that I bought at the shop that day, and they are also, they don't look it here, and actually it's really hard to tell, but they are purple buttons. So I bought quite a few. I don't need that many. I don't know why I bought so many of those, and I sure hope I didn't pay the price that I saw in here later, but I don't think I did. I think they gave me an empty container for them, but they were pretty, if that had been the buttons, that was pretty pricey. So that's what I'm working on next, and I'm doing, I'm planning now to do 1 repeat a day on this as well, which is 14 rows and does a whole cable part there, that segment of the design. Okay, the next work that I have, the next thing that I am working on is another pair of socks. My goal this year was to use up some self-striping yarn and to also work on using up my sock blanks. So I went to a sock blank this time, and when I do sock blanks, my sock blanks are all but one. Excuse me, it's all tangled up in my glasses. I keep a pair of glasses in every knitting bag, and yarn gets mixed up in them. This is an Andre Sunet's sock blank. And it has it's purple, as you can see, with a beautiful swans. Put it up closer for you. And I decided to do shorty socks. I've never made a pair of shorty socks. I'm just doing them a plain old vanilla shorty sock. But here is what I have so far. Just a short little cuff, and I did, I don't know, 8 or 10, maybe less than that, rows of stockinette. And then I'm doing a heel flap, the slip stitch heel flap with a garter edge. And again, I don't know which heel I use, so I turned the heel. And I've just finished the gusset decreases right about here, and so I'm on the little home stretch to finish out the foot and the toe, and I'll have my first one. Let me show you the other side. So this side has this little pocket here of just the white. It pooled there, and of course that is part of one of the swans. Here, you can see. So now I should have another section like that, although it won't be quite, it might not pool at all this way because this was over the area where you've just picked up the gusset and you have an extra, I think an extra 30 some odd or more stitches on your needles. So when it comes down here, there'll be fewer stitches, so it might not pool the same way. I'm curious to see. And I am keeping this in my little tote that I made and showed you last time. I had purchased the pattern and kit from Never Not Knitting shop, which is an online shop, as well as a brick and mortar shop out in California. And I had purchased this, and it is perfect for keeping the sock blank down in, and you can knit straight through this. I'm not someone who can walk and knit, but I am able to just leave it like this and pull the work out as I go. Now, interestingly, last time I podcast was when I shared this, and this is part of the surprise this week. I guess they've sold out of all of their kits, but they are now at Never Not Knitting. They are now offering custom kits from fabric that they have in the shop. And some of our viewers inspired that. They must have contacted the shop and wanted this, and this fabric was gone. And I think all their kits then were gone. So they've are offering custom kits. So if you were interested in some of the fabric that they have, they will make up a custom kit for you to make this wonderful little tote that I just still am in love with. So that, I think, is my last work in progress, and that will lead us right into the next segment where I talk about a special giveaway. So now let's talk about some giveaways. And if you watched our last episode, episode 20, you will have seen this book, Annie and the Swiss Cheese Scarf by Alana Dacos. And she is the owner of Never Not Knitting. She's a pattern designer, an author, a shop owner. She used to have an audio podcast, and all-around wonderful knitter. Well, she's also extremely generous and kind, and she contacted me and said she would like to offer to the podcast some giveaways. And the first is she is mailing me 2 copies of the deluxe set of this book that she's going to sign. So I will be offering those as giveaways. In order to participate in the giveaway, if you would be interested in receiving this lovely prize, please respond over in the Ravelry group. And our group is called InaPickleKnittingon Ravelry. And if you will go in there, there will be a new thread, and I will make it a sticky thread, which I've learned means that it stays up at the top, and that's good. So it'll be up at the top, and you don't have to browse for it. And it will say Annie and the Swiss Cheese Scarf. So if you're interested in receiving a signed deluxe set of this, if you look at her shop, you will see that the deluxe set includes a puzzle with this book, paper dolls, and some stickers. So that is a lovely, very, very generous gift. So if you're interested in that, if you have a certain special someone you'd like to share it with, please go to the Ravelry group and respond in the Annie and the Swiss Cheese Scarf thread, which will be close to the top. And what I would like for you to do is to visit the Never Not Knitting online shop, and it's a very professionally done website. It's just gorgeous, as everything she does is. And look through, there's several different categories of things. There's the books, and that's where you can see what the prize is. I wish I had it to show you today, but it hasn't been delivered yet, and I did want to get this out to you all as soon as I could. So I will have it to show you next time. but go in there and visit her shop and visit some of the different sections that she has, patterns and books and kits and sewing and different things, and tell me something that you would particularly like to have. You know, if money were no object, what would you like to have? And that response in that thread will be your entry into that giveaway. So I thank Alana Dacos so very much for selecting this little podcast to do this wonderful giveaway. I'm so very, very pleased and grateful for that generosity. Thank you. So, I forgot. And she's also offering to you a 25% off in her shop until August 31st with the coupon code PICKLE. And I believe that is 25% off on any of the Annie products, the Annie Deluxe set and the Annie book and the Annie Learns to Knit. Any of those would be 25% off with the coupon code PICKLE. That's through August 31st. And so while you're over there looking, if you would like to purchase something, please do. That would be a wonderful way to thank Alana Dacos for her generosity. And also, those books that you purchase with that discount code, there's an option for you to have them signed as well, which would be an extra special treat with that prize. We also have another giveaway, and this was from the last podcast, and I have already drawn a winner for that. That was our lovely donation by Crafternoon Treats, Catherine at Crafternoon Treats, and she offered these gorgeous stitch markers, which denote when you should make one right or left and when you should SSK or knit two together. And they are packaged up for you here, as well as this beautiful set of mini skeins. And these are on her Fabulous 4 special limited edition. Can't get them anymore. Fabulous 4 blend. This is Masham, Romney, British Alpaca, and Blueface Leicester. And each one, it's a fingering weight, and each one's 40 yards approximately. So this set here is going to, and I put in the numbers 2 through 82 in random number generator. It gave me number 63, which is called Blessed One by Grace, and her name is Grace, and she lives here in Virginia with me. So that was nice. You should get this very quickly as soon as you, Grace, if you can send me a private message on Ravelry with your full name and your mailing address, I will get this right out to you. So congratulations, Grace, and thank you all for visiting Catherine's shop over in her on Etsy. And you all seemed very pleased with everything that she had to offer. And I thank you for visiting her shop. So those are our special giveaways for this episode. Now it's time for our children's literature book. But before I forget, the shawl in the background here, I just never remembered to talk about that. This is the Quaker Yarn Stretcher Shawlette and is by Susan Ashcroft. I did it in a Mountain Colors Perspectives Twizzle, and I think it was a teal colorway. It was some mini skeins. And the reason that I bought this, I didn't accidentally buy the yarn, but I thought when I bought it that it was the yarn for a different project when I was in the, this was Nature's Yarn again. I was in the shop and there were two things side by side, and I thought what I bought was enough to do this project, even though I knew it didn't seem like enough yarn, but I asked, and that's the yarn for this project. Well, there were two projects there. So she said, oh yes, that's it. And the pattern name's written on the back. You can download it from Ravelry. So it was just a miscommunication there because there were two different things pictured or displayed together. So anyway, I didn't want to make what they had wanted it from. And so I thought I had made a Quaker yarn stretcher before out of a more yarn than this was. This was about 220 yards. But you can make that and just stop when you run out of yarn. So I thought, okay, well, whatever I end up with is great. And so it's really a shawlette or more of a scarf, but it's very easy to make. It's a great pattern, and it might even be a free pattern. And I did put a shawl pin on it, and I'll be putting some pictures in here so you can see it stretched out. My daughter's holding it in one outside, and I think I've got one of being blocked and another one of it arranged differently on a coat hanger. So I'm sure you're looking at those pictures now, but it also has a shawl pin on it, and this is one I bought at Maryland Sheep and Wool this year. This is Crafty Flutter by Creations, and that is the shawl pin that's on it right now. So that's my shawl in the background. Now let's get to our book. Our book today is called Leave Me Alone by Vera Broskall, and this was a last year or year before Caldecott Honor book. And in this story, it is a grandmother, and she needs to get her knitting done. There are things that have to be knit. She lives with a very big family. Look at that. It almost reminds you of the There Was an Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe. And nothing was getting done, and winter was coming, and they are doing all sorts of things with her yarn. They're playing games with it and trying to eat it and letting it just, the yarn roll away. And the old woman was at the end of her rope. As you can see, that yarn ball just stopped, and she has had it. So she makes up her bed, and she gets some tea, and she packs her bag, and she walks out and says, "Leave me alone." And this story, she continues to several different places, trying to get some peace and quiet to do her knitting. Well, she doesn't get it even when she goes to the moon. So she goes through a wormhole in the universe, okay? And she has the perfect place to do her knitting. So she completes her knitting and cleans up the spot where she's been working, heads back home. And I'll let you know the rest. There's no punchline to it, but the rest when you read the book yourself. So that's a really cute little story, and enjoyed so much by everyone that it won a Caldecott Honor, which is quite an accomplishment. Now it's time to talk about what I am grateful for today or this week. And I'm grateful it's a beautiful day. We have a lovely day here today, and we have had some big storms here lately. I don't usually talk too much about the weather, but we had quite the weather come through just on Saturday. We had a storm come through with something that I never heard of before, a straight line storm, and wind like I've never seen before. And I was reading about this straight line formation, and it said the winds can be as strong as a Category 5 hurricane or tornado, but it's going through very quickly. We had 60-foot oaks down in our neighborhood, and so I'm grateful none of them hit houses. That, they fell, which is sad enough, but didn't hurt anyone, so I'm very grateful for that. So I'm grateful also that it is a beautiful day today with none of that in the forecast. I also want to share with you something going along with this gratefulness, and that's my word of the year. And it, I happen to be in a little shop, Lake Ridge Nursery. It is a nursery, but they have a gift shop inside, and found this adorable little box here. It's like a Altoids box almost. It says "Live Happy Gratitude Box," and inside, very cute little teeny tiny pom-poms, but a little poem, which I won't read to you, but in order to help you remember what you're grateful for, there's a little pen and a pad of paper, and you can keep this in your purse or sitting out on your counter, and it's cute, and it's a reminder to look for those things to be grateful for. Well, I purchased it, and I had my grandson with me that day, and he wanted it, so we came home instead, and he made one. So I save Altoids tins because I'm fascinated with, if you look on Pinterest, there's a million things you can do with them, and I love miniatures, and I just want to make all of them. So I save Altoids tins. And this one, he put Peppa Pig stickers on and decorated it. And then inside he has crayons and I cut up some little pieces of paper for him. And so he can take this with him in the car, or I keep this in my in the purse so that I can give it to him when we're places that he needs something to do. So I wanted to share those little things with you along with my gratitude today. The last time that I podcast, I did not mean to be enigmatic about anything, but I did mention my stash, and then I didn't talk about it later, which I said that I probably would do. That podcast was getting really long, and so I also forgot. But what I've done with my stash, about about 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, I was listening to the Curious Handmade audio podcast, and I'm a regular listener to that podcast, and Helen was talking about her stash, and I don't recall now if she had found that there had been moths or something, but she became concerned about that. And that then put a light bulb over my head and went, I hadn't even thought, oh my gosh, that's something here that could happen. I didn't think that anything had, but it worried me. So I decided to put all my stash in Ziploc bags, and I actually took each bag and wrote the date on it and put it in my freezer and let it stay in there, like I had several bags at a time, and I would take them out after a week and put more in, because trying to freeze little critters if there should be something in there. And I didn't find any indication of any activity at all. But and I found that I don't like it like this. It's hard for me to look through it, and so I didn't like it, so I took it all out. I thought, okay, I don't think there's anything here, and all of this looks fine. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we were having some workmen at the house doing something, and they had the front door open for longer, than you normally would, but, they were carrying stuff in and out. And so right while they were doing that, I looked up, and on the wall was this little moth about that big. And I went, and we caught it. I got it, and I thought, oh my gosh, is that a clothing moth? And I looked online, and it really didn't look like it, but then again, sometimes it did look like it, because this was with the wings out, and I just panicked, and I thought, I really need to do this. I need to keep my yarn protected. I don't want to provide a smorgasbord for insect activity. So I packaged it all back up in the Ziploc bags, and I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks, and I don't like trying to find something. And of course, then things aren't back where they were before, so I already have had trouble finding stuff, but I just thought I need to maybe be smarter about this. And so that's why the yarn is in plastic bags, and there's a whole bunch in tubs, along with in plastic bags in tubs, that doesn't fit on the shelf too. So that's what I did, and I didn't mean to leave it hanging out there. I apologize for that. Let me see some other things. I'm going to look away over here. I've got my whiteboard with my notes on it. And, the name change. I mentioned last podcast that I was considering doing a name change. So I did in both Ravelry and on Instagram, change my name to InaPickleKnitting. So that fits along a whole lot better with the podcast and makes a whole lot more sense to anybody. So I hope there was no confusion. I think it worked, but if you saw any problems or can tell me it didn't work, please let me know. And so on InaPickleKnitting on Ravelry, that is my username, and on Instagram. And my email is still inapickleknitting@gmail.com. And of course, the podcast is InaPickleKnitting. So everything's the same now. Let's see. I think that's everything except for me to go and mention our make-alongs that we have right now. We still have the shawl along. And the drawing for that, I did look in the thread, and it said that it was going to be around July, I think 17th, or after the podcast after that. So that's, no, I actually have several more things. What am I thinking? I'm sorry, I interrupted myself. I hate when I do that. But my mind just doesn't work in a linear fashion. It pops all over the place. So don't even know where I was. Okay, so our shawl along, that drawing will be sometime mid-July-ish, I will say. And I did say that the price for that was going to be a shawl size B bag and the stitch markers from Knitty by Nature that were gold hexagon little stitch markers with a B progress keeper. And I am working on that. But for everything I've tried to sew for the last 2 weeks, I'm missing something, and I just haven't had time to get the something. So I'm missing black canvas. I am like 2 inches short of having enough to do the contrast bottom of the bag in the black canvas, which is what I wanted to use. So I'm working on that. It is to a point, but I haven't been able to move farther. And we also have the Oldies make along going on. And in that one, it's, as I mentioned before, it's anything that's an old pattern, old yarn, old fabric, whatever you're doing. And a lot of people have been putting things that they're getting done in there. And I've been doing things from my old projects that kind of forget about because the new shiny thing's right in front of you. But I'm feeling really good about getting those old things done. I hope you are too. And if you've got some oldies that you are working on, patterns or yarn or fabric or anything, go over and put it in that oldies thread for us. Join the chatter thread and the finished object thread if you would. And so we can ask you questions in the chatter thread. That's what's good about having it in both places. And I appreciate when you do that. And we always have our sock along going on. So any socks that you finish, if they're your first socks ever, enter them twice in the finished object thread. If you're doing anything in any kind of stripes in socks, whether you're putting the stripes together yourself or you're using self-striping yarn, please add those to the sock along, which I'll do a drawing for next podcast. So those are our make-alongs right now. And let's move to the next segment, which is that miscellaneous sorts of stuff. So some of those odds and ends are, first I wanted to talk about some things that I'm planning to be knitting on when I finish up what I've got going now. And the first one is this Banner Unfurled shawl by Katrina's Creations, and she gifted one of her patterns to a viewer that we announced last time. And I'm going to be doing this in red, white, and blue. And what I'm using is knit 1, crochet 2, and it's Sebago 100% Australian superwash merino wool. It is in a DK weight. And I have not found yet, but will be purchasing, I think, some little white seed beads or little pearls or something to do that part of the shawl to make this Banner Unfurled shawl. So that's one thing that's on the horizon for me. And two other things are mittens. Now that they're both mittens, not fingerless mitts. Since I'm onto that trick with the 9-inch circular, I thought let's keep the momentum going and hopefully make progress and get better at this. The first pair that I want to make are these Sweet Nectar mitts, and this is by Tanis Fiber Arts. I thought it was, but I just couldn't read it backwards. It was too light. Tanis Fiber Arts. These appeal to me so much because I am a birder. I love birds. I keep a life list, and I provide a nature habitat that's bird friendly. And hummingbirds are one of my favorites. And this is just the most clever design, where when you put your hands up, the hummingbird is nectaring from that flower. So I ordered the kit from Tanis Fiber Arts, but I don't think the kit I'm getting is this particular color set, but I found one that I really like the colors for, and I'm excited to make those and to receive that kit. And then I also want to make this pair of mitts called Magpie Mittens, and I do have yarn for this. I just have to make sure that it's the right weight. What I have in black and white is a Galway by Plymouth Yarns, I think. And that's one of the yarns I couldn't find when I redid everything, so I have to find it, but I do have it. I'm pretty sure it's a DK, so I need to check everything and see. Okay, the next thing I wanted to share was I was a winner! I was so excited. I won a free pattern from Helen Stewart with the New Shawl Society 3 going on. She had a giveaway that she planned, and you could win. I won a pattern of my choice, and I own most of her patterns, so it was it's like, oh, well, I know there are some I want, but I had to go through and say, nope, got that one, got that one, got that one. But I ordered the Fireflies Rising shawl, and I want to make that once I get the Banner Unfurled shawl done. So and finish my Sophie shawl. So that'll be third in line there when I finish that, because I was just so excited that to have won that. I watched the Meanwhile at the Castle podcast with sisters who are co-hosts, and that is Emily and Deborah, and they both have Etsy shops. Emily recently opened her own yarn dyeing studio, and she has an Etsy shop. She is the Yarn Berry to sound like library, and she bases all of her colorways on books. And I had ordered this a while back from her. This is based on The Secret Garden, and it is this beautiful tonal gray with these pops of, there you can see some almost, you know, a magenta, a purple, deep lavender, but I thought this would be great in a shawl. I tend to not have enough neutrals to go with things, and I felt like this would be a nice neutral with a shawl, and so I'm probably going to look for, I do have some colors I think will go along with this little pop of color, and maybe I'll do my Fireflies Rising shawl with that. So this is Emily's Yarn Company, and doesn't she have the cutest tag? And inside her tag, she has a little place for you, like it was a library checkout, and describes the theme of this particular colorway. And I won't even try to say it because I don't think I can, but I'll put it here and you can try to read it. So that's the first thing. And Deborah does a lot of sewing. She is a fantastic seamstress, sewist, sewer, however you want to put it. And what blew me away was when I pulled this out of the mailbox. These two ladies are so clever. Her packaging is recycling paper grocery sack, and she zigzag stitches the back up. It came like this, and that just it put me over the edge there. It was just like, this is too clever, too cute. It was packaged beautifully with this wonderful little tag. Her company is Indigo Chicken Dolls, and she may do other things in addition to this, sew other things, but what I had seen so often were her notions pouches that were just beyond clever. And I never could get the updates, and I just kind of wrote to her. I wasn't complaining, but Instagram, my feed, it's like I'll see things and it's like, oh, this was posted 5 days ago, but I didn't see it 5 days ago. It wasn't in the feed 5 days ago. They're just, I don't know what they're doing, but they just put things out there. And I said, oh, I wish I'd known about that because I really wanted one, and I'm seeing it, I saw something there. And she said, well, she suggested, why don't you turn on notifications? So I did, and I made the next update, and I couldn't show this to you last podcast because I had ordered it, but it showed up that afternoon when I was all finished recording. So I've sat with not using this for 2 weeks now, and I'm so excited now I can finally use it and share it with you. But this is my little notions pouch that she made. I'm blown away. Her tag, her chimney, her fabrics. Look at those. The little window sewn. This is a button here on the door. Here's the back of the house, and then the zipper is along the side, and you have another coordinated fabric in there for your little notions. Is that just beautiful? Putting that zipper in along that curved edge, oh my goodness, so much work. Deborah, your talent just amazes me. So that's Indigo Chicken Dolls, and Meanwhile at the Castle, and Yarnberry. I always want to say library. Guess it's the librarian in me. But Deborah put a little surprise inside the notions pouch of these stitch markers. These are little elephants. Are they gorgeous? Now, Deborah, I don't know if you meant for these to be a prize for the podcast, but I'm keeping them. These are gorgeous. I just love them, and I'm so tickled. And also a little button, Meanwhile at the Castle. Not sure that's focusing very well, but I will put links to all of that for you down here. So if you stay to listen to these special handmade items from some very creative ladies, thanks for staying for that. And thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope there was something that you found interesting, and that you will come back and join me again in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye for now.